Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me for the happy hour. My name is Dr. Glenna. I am a licensed mental health therapist with a private practice in Torrance, California, where I specialize in anxiety-based disorders, emotional abuse recovery, and helping people to rebuild and reshape their lives. I teach the idea of therapy as a lifestyle. Therapy as a lifestyle is the idea of addressing your mental health before it becomes mental illness. So this is being intentional about targeting major life areas so that you can have a whole, well-rounded life. Okay. This is the happy hour. The happy hour is my weekly wellness webinar. It's completely free. If you can't watch it live, you can catch the replays on my YouTube channel. Um, the happy hour is really an opportunity for us to learn. The happy hour is not to be used in lieu of any psychiatric treatment, meaning you don't get to say, well, I went to the happy hour on Wednesday, so I don't need to go to group or take my medication. Please use the happy hour for educational purposes only and use it to supplement whatever you are doing with your therapist or whatever you're working on with your psychiatrist. Also, if you're experiencing any mental health symptoms, please contact a primary care physician, psychiatrist, or a licensed clinician. Today, we're going to jump right on in there with, there we go, slides. There we go. All right. Today, we're going to talk about the power of validation and why feeling seen changes us. Again, my name is Dr. Glenna, and I like tacos. I like all tacos. I like authentic tacos. I like Black American tacos, but I like tacos. Validation. One of my favorite quotes, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's a Maya Angelou quote. And it speaks to validation. Hang on a second. I just realized all of my devices are not turned off. Okay, there we go. It speaks to the idea of your actions are not always enough. It can't always be, well, I did this for you. I did that for you. Sometimes you hear parents say, I put a roof over your head and I gave you food. Or, you hear a husband or a wife say, like, I cooked for you or I paid your rent. So then it doesn't matter how I made you feel. Okay. And it just doesn't work like that. People never forget how you made them feel. What is emotional validation? This is the recognition of a person's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and behaviors as valid and understandable. Emotional validation is when you are able to recognize another person's experience and let them know that it is worth something. You let them know that their feelings count, that they are seen. Validation is embedded in relationships and through repeated emotional experiences. Humans will learn what emotions, what expressions are acceptable and okay, and which ones are unsafe to express. Emotional validation is learned and embedded within interpersonal experiences. For example, if you are around a group of people that feel like, I don't know, if you trip and fall, that's funny, you will learn that that experience does not warrant emotional validation. Whereas if you are around a group of people where you trip and fall in front of them and they're like, oh my goodness, are you okay? That must have been really embarrassing for you. You learn that that experience does warrant emotional validation. On a larger scale, we learn it in terms of our interaction with early child care providers, friends and family, culture going beyond race and ethnicity, but culture being like where you grew up, the time that you grew up in. If you grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, relational understanding of validation, it's embedded through repeated relational experiences. Validation is relational and perceived. So validation is often subjective and it's relational and it is emotionally interpreted. Okay. Meaning your understanding of validation, whether or not you deserve it, how to provide it, is subjective. It has to do with subjective, meaning yourself, what you think is important. So if you come to someone and you feel like what you're saying is important, That makes it important. It's a very subjective experience because the next person might not feel like it's that big of a deal. And it is relational. Like I said, we understand validation and worthiness and whether or not we give validation or need to receive it in terms of our repeated relational experiences. Okay. If you repeatedly have someone that validates your feelings about how difficult your job is, you start to understand that, yes, my feelings around the difficulty of my job are valid. It comes through relational experiences and it is emotionally interpreted. Again, your emotional experience will tell you whether or not you feel like this is valid or it should receive some level of validation. Emotional validation is formed through emotional learning over time. People begin learning what emotions are welcomed. If you cry a lot, or if you are angry and people invalidate your anger or your tears on a regular basis, you start to learn that emotion is not okay. If you say, "Oh, I'm 5 years old and mommy, this hurt my feelings," and everybody says, "No, don't talk about that. I need to focus on making dinner." Over time, you learned hurt feelings are not a welcome emotion. You also learn what emotions create rejection. If you show up with, again, with tears or irritability and people remove themselves from you or they say things that hurt your feelings in response to you expressing your feelings, then you learn through repeated emotional experiences that those emotions will be rejected. And why does that matter? Because all humans desire close connection with other people. We all like to be close to others. We operate as a pack, so to speak. We don't really operate for too long completely individually. And so if you are rejected, there's a threat that you will not be included in a larger community and a larger family system. So that's actually really, it's perceived to be very dangerous. And you learn what emotions have to be hidden, right? Say you go to a funeral and you're pretty young and someone says cut all that crying out, or you have to be strong for your mom, your dad, your siblings, your grandma. And so you learn your grief has to be hidden. Okay, through emotional learning, through repeated emotional interactions with relational interactions with other people, you learn, oh, those emotions have to be hidden. And it also has to do with our attachment style. Validation, positive validation contributes to a secure attachment. So people that receive healthy validation on a regular basis, they tend to have secure emotional attachments. They tend to have better emotional regulation, meaning they tend to be in a position where they can calm themselves down, where they can recognize that they do have a heightened emotion or they are feeling kind of lower. They're able to regulate themselves faster, and it also builds a higher level of self-trust. So essentially, validation, good or bad, positive or negative, it helps to shape how we relate to our own emotions. If you were positively validated, then it's going to shape you in one way. If you were invalidated, it's going to shape you in another way. What is chronic emotional invalidation, which I think is what we want to focus on when we talk about having your feelings invalidated. Chronic emotional invalidation occurs when a person repeatedly receives messages that your feelings are wrong, that your emotions are excessive. Oh my God, you do too much. Were you mad again? Oh my God. Like, oh, your feelings are always hurt. When you receive feedback that your emotions are excessive, that becomes chronic emotional validation. And when your reactions are inappropriate. And you also receive a message that your internal experience is unacceptable. Chronic emotional invalidation, this is something that happens over a period of time consistently. Okay, there's somewhere later on in my slides where I'll mention the idea that everybody gets invalidated every now and again, right? Even a person that loves you and adores you and is very secure and shows up for you will miss the mark. That's not who we're talking about. We're talking about people that consistently do not show up for you. That when you try to have regular emotions, you are having a very normal response to an abnormal amount of stress. And instead of people holding you and holding space for you, they try to tell you that your feelings are wrong. You shouldn't feel that way. That, well, that's your mom, so it doesn't matter. Well, that's your dad, so it doesn't matter. Or your emotions are too big. Like, oh my goodness, you're angry because she stole your money. You just need to get over it. They try to treat you like your emotions are excessive. When this happens over a period of time consistently, now we're talking chronic emotional invalidation. There's a difference. Here we go. There's a difference between occasional invalidation and chronic emotional invalidation. I want to point that out because I don't want anyone to say, well, Dr. Glenna said you didn't validate my feelings, and so this is abuse. That is not what Dr. Glenna said. It's not what I said. What I said is over a period of time when someone refuses to show up for you, okay, refuses to validate your feelings. Everyone experiences invalidation sometimes, but the damage happens when it is repetitive, when it is relational, and when it is developmental. So the damage happens when it happens over and over and over again. The damage happens when you are in a relationship with a person. Your best friend always invalidates you. Your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your spouse consistently invalidates you. Your mother, your father, your teacher. Okay, when there is a relationship where it just keeps happening in that relationship or developmental. So when we talk about early child care providers, parents, loved ones, teachers, so on and so forth, there is something developmental that happens in children where they require validation. So when they hit you with the little karate, look what I can do, they need you to say, wow, that was really good, because that level of validation helps them developmentally. So we have damage occurs when we have a child that did not get that in their very formative years. Repeated invalidation can create emotional inhibition. So when you try to express your feelings, you're trying to let them come up and come out, and there's a person that keeps pushing back and saying, no, 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 it creates a version of you where your emotions are inhibited, meaning your emotions won't even come to the surface. This is when I end up with people in my office that are like, I don't know how I feel. I can't cry. Everything is okay. I don't talk about really, really deep things. Chronic invalidation makes it so that you have trouble even acknowledging your feelings and even allowing them to come up. Or if you do have feelings, there's shame around your feelings. There's like, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. I shouldn't feel like this. I feel ashamed that I'm even having this experience to begin with. And there's difficulty trusting your internal experiences. So you'll have a little something that comes up. You'll feel a sensation in your body, but you won't trust that it means you are irritated or that you feel slighted or that you feel abandoned. You won't trust that the feeling is trying to inform you of something because you've had your experiences invalidated so many times that you don't even know how to recognize what to do with that. And why do people invalidate others? Why are we like this? Is always the question. Sometimes cultural norms, really quick. I always forget to say this until partway through. My lists are never exhaustive. Just because I did not explicitly list something on one of my slides, it doesn't mean that it's not real. So if you have an experience that I didn't put here, it counts. Okay. Why do people invalidate others? Cultural norms. Sometimes within certain cultures, and it's usually, for survival purposes, or that's just kind of how it's always been. We don't even realize that we're not acknowledging feelings, right? It's like, stop crying, cut all that out. Boys don't cry, right? That's a gender cultural norm. Black people don't cry over that. Black people don't get mad over that. Like, that's just how it is. So, or be strong. You don't really have the luxury of being scared or being overwhelmed. You just got to be strong or move on. Okay. It comes from a place of like, listen, we got too much going on. We don't really have the time or the headspace or the bandwidth to really focus on this for too long. So I just need you to move on so that we can keep going, or just cultural norms in terms of, again, I mentioned the funeral example of there being an expectation that you don't show any raw emotions publicly. Okay, so I've heard that a lot where people go to funerals, they've lost a loved one, they've lost a parent, and there's somebody that's like, you got to be strong, for such and such, right? The cultural, the family culture, the race culture, the Southern California culture, the Detroit culture, like the area creates this dynamic that, you feel compelled to adhere to. Emotional flooding. When the person that you're trying to talk to is flooded with their own emotional experiences. This happens a lot it happens with parents, it happens in relationships. But just imagine you try to go to your parent and you try to tell them some feelings that you have, but what you're telling them triggers their own experience. So instead of being able to validate your experience, they're like, oh my goodness, I knew I was a bad mom. That one time where I dropped you off at your aunt's house and she was really mean. And all of a sudden, all the embarrassment and pain and shame, they have their own emotional experience and they become emotionally flooded. Now that they're flooding, and we know what flooding does, flooding means it overflows, right? It's not a cup with a little extra room, it is spilling out of the seams. So the person that you're going to is emotionally flooded. So when you come to them, the only way that they can handle it is to shut you down. They get quiet, they ignore you, they yell at you, they try to tell you that, you're making a big deal out of nothing. You need to calm down. They become overwhelmed with their own emotions to the point where the only thing that they can do in that scenario is to shut you down. Why do people invalidate others? They have a lack of emotional regulation. Similar to flooding, they have all types of emotions that are happening. And so when, like, just imagine they're juggling, three or four balls in the air. So when you come with your emotions, even if it doesn't have anything to do with them, you come with your emotions like, hey, can you throw this one in the mix? They're dysregulated. They're just regular and they're like, oh, nope, I've dropped everything. They don't have the ability to regulate their own emotions in order to take on yours. We see this a lot with parents. Okay. Parents that, I mean, if you've been a parent for more than 30 seconds, something gonna happen, shoes gonna be on the wrong feet, toothpaste on the floor. Something is going to happen that will trigger your emotions, right? Like it doesn't even have to be something that's devastating. It could just be something that is happening that is making you have an experience. And then you have a kid that comes and they're crying because they're having trouble tying their shoe. Okay. The lack of emotional regulation makes the parent turn and go, oh my gosh, you're doing too much. And now they've invalidated this little, 4 or 5 year old that's having a very large struggle. For them, it's a very large struggle. But because of your own lack of emotional regulation, you end up invalidating someone else's experience. Sometimes it's a lack of emotional awareness. Sometimes people genuinely lack language or insight. Okay. Sometimes people they didn't realize that you were coming to them for support. They didn't realize that you were coming for help or that you needed support. They genuinely had just a lack of emotional awareness about what you were presenting, what you were saying. Like you come to somebody and you're like, yeah, I had a hard day. And they're like, yeah, that sucks. They didn't realize that in that moment you were asking for some validation, that you needed something from them. Sometimes people invalidate others as a form of passive aggressive control. They're trying to minimize your feelings. They're trying to dominate the situation. They're trying to maintain power. There are times where you come to people with a genuine concern and they don't want your concern to take up too much space. And so they'll use passive aggressive control. Passive aggressive is a form of communication where you communicate something to someone indirectly. So aggressive is I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to be big. My intention is to intimidate you. Passive is I'm going to be small and I'm going to be agreeable. And whatever you say, yep, everything is good. Passive aggressive is I'm going to stonewall you when you bring up a certain topic, meaning I'm not going to engage you in conversation when you talk about certain things. If you express a concern to me, I'm going to all of a sudden have something so big happening in my life, and I'm not going to talk to you directly about it, but I'm going to create a scenario that now minimizes whatever your concern was because I'm trying to passive aggressively control the situation. And in turn, I'm going to invalidate whatever it is that you said. Another reason, there are generational differences. I had this conversation recently with someone. The boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, the middle child, the Gen Zs. There are generational differences between people. So many people were raised with survival focused communication. Okay, there's a whole generation, the silent generation before the boomers. There's a whole generation of people that learn if you just don't talk about it, everything will be okay. So they use emotional suppression as a form of emotional regulation. And there's again generations. The boomers did not have the internet. Millennials, Gen X, did not have the internet. Older millennials got it. But Gen X and boomers did not have the internet. Gen X and boomers did not have a Dr. Glenna that can log in from Torrance, California, talk to you wherever you are, record it and put it on a YouTube channel so that you can go back and watch it 10 more times and take notes, which means there are certain generations that are not privy to information. They're not privy to certain language, to certain vocabulary and different techniques. And so the generations handled things differently. And that's how it comes out. Why grandma's so mean or why granddaddy act like that? Generationally, people did things in a way that fit the season where they were growing up in. Also, sometimes people are sincerely unaware. Sometimes people think that when they're minimizing things, that they're actually helping, or if they're distracting you, that they're comforting you. So sometimes people, they're not trying to minimize or they're not trying to invalidate your experience, but they are like, you're like, man, I had such a hard day. They're like, oh my God, come here, let me make you something to eat. They really think that by shifting gears and shifting your energy and your focus away from whatever is hurting you, they think that they're helping you in doing so. Or sometimes they hit you with a girl, it's going to be all right. At least you got a job. They think that by giving you a positive perspective that they're actually helping you. Right. So it's certainly not intended, has nothing to do with their emotions. It's not intended to invalidate you. They actually think that they are supporting you in this manner. And of course, good old-fashioned abusive dynamics. In abusive relationships, invalidation is intentional. In abusive relationships, invalidating your feelings is intended to make you stop bringing up problems, to make you confused about how you feel. It's intended to gaslight you and make you confused. That's how it works. And sometimes people have a fear of vulnerability. They invalidate because emotional intimacy feels unsafe. Okay. So you come and you're like, hey, partner, I really want to talk to you about my heart and something that's really been bothering you. And your partner's like, like, woo, I don't want to go that deep. Then all of a sudden they get busy, back of their head start itching. They can think of 10 different things that they need to do because vulnerability, it feels unsafe. So when you come and you're asking for validation, they can't handle it. They can't handle the vulnerability that comes with what you're talking about and the need for validation and what it's going to require of them emotionally. What are some examples? Ignoring a person's feelings is invalidating. When someone says, hey, I feel like this, or this hurt my feelings, or I was thinking about this, ignoring what they're saying. And I mean, like, not responding to them, right? Like, it literally being quiet when they're trying to talk to you, glazing over it in the conversation. Ignoring a person's feelings is invalidating. Dismissing their emotions. Someone can come to you directly and say exactly how they feel, and you're like, no, it's not that, it's this. You are dismissing a person's emotional experience. And again, chronic invalidation is where we run into trouble. Not a well-meaning person that loves you and is trying, but this behavior over a period of time is where it can be damaging. Belittling reactions. Okay, belittling like, oh my goodness, it's just not that big of a deal. Okay. Gaslighting people. Gaslighting is a psychological technique where a person tries to make you question your reality. So you say, I feel like this, or this bothers me, or this is just wrong. And they're like, no, it's not that big of a deal. You remembering it wrong. It didn't even happen that way. Gaslighting a person is a direct form of invalidating, making the person the problem and not the actual problem is a form of invalidation. Someone comes to you and says, hey, I have this concern. Can we talk about it? This hurt my feelings. This bothers me. And instead of focusing on what they're saying, you shift it back to the person. And it's like, you know what? You're the problem because you're always complaining about something. You're not really mad at me. Your concern isn't the issue. The issue is you're really mad at your parents. You're really just upset with work. Making the person the problem instead of actually addressing the problem is a form of invalidation. Mocking vulnerability. It is exactly what it sounds like. A person comes to you and they're vulnerable, and you're like, no, you're sad. Oh, it was that hard for you. Literally mocking a person that comes to you and they're being vulnerable enough to say, hey, this hurts me. Withholding affection. Withholding affection, silent treatment, stonewalling, withholding affection physically, mentally, emotionally is a form of abuse. I say that I've said that in 1,000 different happy hours. The silent treatment is a form of abuse. So when your child, your loved one, your friend comes to you with something and it's too big or you don't know what to do with it, withholding affection is not only invalidating, but it is abusive. Minimizing the person's pain. Clearly, it's like, no, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, your boss, I mean, he said that to you, but it's not that big of a deal. Comparing suffering. Now, it's one thing when you give someone an example with the intention of saying, hey, I can relate to what you're saying. You're not the only person going through this. I went through something similar. I got through it. That's one thing. But when you start comparing traumas, when we start competing for who has it worse, right? Like, oh my goodness, my back hurts. My back hurts too. It's like, okay, hold on a second. Like, can we just sit just a second on what I feel and what I'm saying? Excuse me. You're too sensitive. Just telling someone, trying to convince them that their feelings are the problem. Like, you just feel too much. You need to toughen up. You need to not feel as much is absolutely invalidating. And refusing accountability or an apology is invalidating. I know we joke about this in Black culture and how Black parents don't apologize. They just be like, you want something to eat or you want something from the store. It is invalidating to know that someone was hurt or something bothered them. You know it, but you refuse to slow down and actually apologize for it, or you refuse to take any accountability for their experience. It is invalidating. Long-term impacts. Check the time. Long-term impact of chronic invalidation. Again, something that happens because a well-meaning person missed the mark is one thing. Chronic invalidation is associated with a character flaw, to say the least, in a person. Okay. When someone uses these different tactics in relational dynamics, it's probably something that they are struggling with, but nonetheless, they can struggle with it, and it can also have a very damaging impact if they don't actively do something about it. So, lower self esteem. People begin doubting their emotional worth. Because if I come to my loved one, if I tell you how I feel and you repeatedly convince me that how I feel doesn't matter, it's going to lower my self esteem. Lower self efficacy, a reduced confidence in decision making and judgment. It's going to lower my ability to feel like I can successfully complete things. I'm going to question what I do. I'm going to question my judgment. I'm going to question my instinct because I didn't have it validated at times where I should have. Emotional suppression. People just stop expressing their needs and stop expressing their emotions. And I mean needs across the board. These are people that end up in restaurants with mashed potatoes on their plate when they absolutely ordered mac and cheese. You just learn to stop expressing what you need because deep down you believe nobody is going to validate it. Nobody is going to listen to me. So you just stop expressing your emotions. Again, chronic invalidation creates emotional suppression, and this is particularly damaging in relationships where it is very important to be able to express your needs to a person in a safe manner. Greater reactivity to stress, the nervous system becomes hypersensitive. You end up with all of these emotions deep down on the inside, and when you try to express them, they don't get honored, and so they get suppressed. And so now your nervous system doesn't forget. We always love the book, The Body Keeps Score. The nervous system remembers all of this. And it comes up at very inopportune times. Last week's happy hour, I did one on triggers, and I talked about what happens when your body is triggered and how the body responds physically before it responds logically. Okay. Emotional distancing, difficulty trusting or connecting deeply. When I say chronic, I don't want you to think every day. Chronic can be every couple of weeks. Okay. Something, it just keeps coming up. Or chronic can be when you go to bring up something to someone and they invalidate you, that is chronic. It doesn't have to be every single day that it happens. But when you bring up something, a concern, a feeling, an experience, and your experience is invalidated, that is chronic. When you experience that on a consistent basis, it creates emotional distancing because I can't, why would I feel close to you if I can't come to you with my concerns? Why would I feel close to you if I can't share my heart, if I can't share the things that are bothering me, if I'm having a long day, or if I'm struggling with something? If I come to you and you're going to invalidate my feelings, how could I stay emotionally close? Every time it happens, it chips away at whatever level of intimacy that we have. And then over time, it creates emotional distancing and it creates an increased vulnerability to abuse. So when you are chronically invalidated, especially as children and early caretakers, it teaches you that love and mistreatment can be in the same pocket. And so when someone mistreats you or invalidates you, you learn, well, but that's my fill in the blank. And so you end up in committed relationships where you tolerate mistreatment because you distrust yourself, because you've learned that loved ones mistreat you. And you haven't learned that in romantic relationships and friendships, you cherry pick those people. Another happy hour, pick better apples. Um, I think I did that one in January. I talked about how to select healthy people to be in your life and how to keep healthy people around you, to prevent yourself from being in potentially abusive situations. Also, identity confusion. People stop trusting what they feel, what they need, what they experience. And so you're like, I don't know. Sometimes people become passive. Sometimes they become very aggressive. Sometimes people become passive aggressive because they can't figure out any other way to get their needs met. And so they have to quietly show you how they feel instead of assertively communicating. Um, Decreased or zero contact. People can only tolerate the hurt for so long. People, they can only tolerate it for so long before they start to remove themselves from the pain. So all of a sudden, that friend that we used to come to you and talk to you about things, and now you don't even really hear from them anymore. Or you had a relationship where you felt like, your partner would just come and share their heart with you, and all of a sudden you think everything is okay because they've gotten quiet, but actually they've distanced themselves. Or the family member that just decides to go no contact, because there's only so many times that people can really take that. And of course, shame around emotions. Feelings become associated with weakness or rejection. So you start to feel like, if I share this, if I even have these feelings, even if I don't tell anybody, I'm weak. Something's wrong with me, or I'm going to be rejected again by the pack, or by the larger family system, or by the group, by the culture. So we start to feel shame. Repeated invalidation teaches people to disconnect from themselves and from others. The power of healthy validation. So, what's the big deal? Healthy validation comes in a lot of different forms. I have some, these are some examples, but I also have some like phrases, because if you didn't grow up with a lot of validation, a lot of like active, assertive validation, then sometimes it feels weird. It feels weird. It feels corny. So just know that validation comes in the form of verbal communication. And I'm going to give you some phrases later on, but it comes literally in the form of saying, I apologize. I see how you feel. Validation comes in the form of your tone. You can say, I apologize, but if you're like, I apologize, it don't count. If your tone is off, we can tell. And none of it matters. Keep it to yourself. Okay. Your tone is not what you say, but how you say it, the inflection of your voice, all of these things. So your tone can impact whether or not a person feels validated. Your body language can impact whether or not a person feels validated. If someone is talking to you and telling you how they feel, and you're like on your phone, you're looking down, you stand up and go in the kitchen and start doing stuff in the middle of them talking, you're communicating that they don't have and don't deserve your undivided attention. If they're trying to talk to you and you're like, well, you said, and da 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 da, and your body language is big and aggressive, or there's always heightened stance. That's another one. If you're, tall, or and the person is sitting down, you have to sit down, because your body language is communicating something that might invalidate their experience. Your facial expressions, making eye contact, smiling, nodding your head, your level of responsiveness, all of this creates validation. So you can't just use the saying, I'm very sorry that you feel that way. That doesn't count. It's still invalidating. You got to invoke all of these things from your body. How do we invoke all of these things? Through emotional regulation. You got to regulate whatever is happening for you so that you can show up and validate the person that is in front of you. Some more nonverbal examples: eye contact. Regular eye contact. You don't have to stare into a person's soul and be a weirdo, but regular eye contact within the context of the conversation communicates to the person that you are listening and that you do care about what they have to say. Nodding. Nodding is a nonverbal way of, yes, I'm hearing. Yes, I'm listening. Nodding does not necessarily mean, yes, I agree with you. Nodding just says, yes, I'm here and I'm keeping pace with the conversation in order to keep up with you. Warmth. Warmth, again, is communicated in your body language, in your tone, in your responsiveness. Um, Being a therapist, if you've ever been to my office, I cross my legs. Anytime I sit down, I cross my legs. I have to be very mindful to not cross my legs and my arms, because it can communicate that I'm closed off, right? And sometimes in my office, I'm just cold because the air conditioner be blasting. Don't get me started. I need to call the building management. Don't get me started. But I have to intentionally make sure that my body language creates a feeling of warmth so that my clients know I am listening. Because I really do. I have a rule. I only work with people that I actually like. So I like all my clients, but it's an intentional effort to communicate warmth through my action. Attentive posture, same thing. Sitting up straight, leaning in, making sure that you're doing something to intentionally communicate that you are listening to the person, that you care about what they have to feel. And again, your emotional responsiveness. So it's not enough to just lean in and be like, uh huh, uh huh, uh huh. Your emotional responsiveness, you are a whole person, you're a dynamic being. And in order to do that, in order for you to validate another person, you have to do your own work in your own time to regulate your own emotions. Okay. Otherwise, you're probably emotionally flooded or, there's a lack of awareness. Like we have to do all of these things for ourselves so that we can show up for other people. The power of healthy validation. Healthy validation improves emotional regulation. People calm down faster when they feel understood. Period. People calm down faster when they feel understood. Just being able to like oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this and you did that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see how you would feel that way. Right? If you ever worked in customer service, if you've ever worked at a restaurant or in retail or anything like that, when you let someone know, I understand you, then they're able to calm down. But the more that they have to keep pleading their case and arguing with you about why they're upset, the more that it's up and nobody's calm. Okay. So when people feel validated, we are able to improve our own emotional regulation. Number two, it builds self-trust. Validation enforces my feelings make sense. I don't know how many times I've said this very, very clinical phrase to my clients. You are not crazy. You are not crazy. It makes sense that you would feel that way. Okay. So when a person experiences validation on a consistent basis, it builds their own self trust. So after a while, they don't even need you to say it because they know in their heart of hearts, okay, it does make sense that I would feel this way. I'm not crazy. Validation strengthens relationships. Validation increases safety. Emotional safety is the cornerstone of all relationships. It increases closeness. It increases trust. Emotional validation, when you can look at your partner, your best friend, your coworker, and say, dude, I get it. I get it. I understand. I'm so sorry that you feel that way. Now you've created a bedrock of emotional safety that the relationship is now built on. Healthy validation encourages vulnerability. People open up where they feel emotionally safe. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Emotional safety is the cornerstone of healthy relationships. Nobody is going to open up. Nobody's going to be sincerely vulnerable if they think that they're going to be attacked or disrespected or invalidated. So, if you want a healthy relationship, learn to validate other people because healthy validation encourages vulnerability. It encourages other people to open up because they deem you as emotionally safe. Healthy validation reduces shame. Validation separates the emotions from defectiveness. Shame is almost the idea that not I did something wrong, but I am the something wrong. That is not my quote, and I wish it was. I heard it at a conference. I should have wrote the lady's name down. Shame is not when you feel like you've done something wrong. Shame is when you feel like you are the something wrong. When your feelings are validated, you're able to separate your emotions from I'm something's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me, but I am having a very valid emotional experience. Healthy validation supports healthy nervous system regulation. Feeling emotionally seen reduces threat activation. Again, I did a happy hour on triggers where we talked about what happens when your eyes see something or when you experience something, the messages that it sends to your brain, to your amygdala, to your nervous system, and it tells it to activate before you can logically say we are not in a dangerous situation. It is misinterpreted threat. Okay. Triggers are misinterpreted threat. Go back and watch the full one on triggers. There's actually two on triggers. There's one on triggers that I did last week, and then there's one that I did last fall sometimes. But when you have your feelings validated on a regular basis, you are able to feel emotionally seen and it reduces that threat activation. It slows down the time between when you see something that you think is a potential threat and when your body starts to activate and then you're triggered. Okay. So regular validation slows down that threat activation and it slows down when your body starts to have those misinterpreted It starts to react to those misinterpreted threats. And it increases communication. If I know that when I call this person and I say, hey, I'm kind of concerned, you hurt my feelings, I had a hard day at work. If I know that when I make that phone call that I'm going to be heard and I'm going to be validated, I'm going to communicate more openly and honestly. But if I think that when I communicate how I feel, I'm going to be shut down, I'm going to be invalidated, it's going to decrease my communication. I have my cousin Rob, I've talked about him before, but I can call Rob and be like, you got a second? And he's an early bird. So I can call Rob at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, usually about 8 in the morning. And as long as he's not in a meeting at work, Rob will pick up the phone and I can just be open and he will validate my experience. He will hold me accountable, but he will also validate my experience. And the knowing that I have that open line of communication actually makes me call less. It makes it so that I don't need it as often. But when you know that you can communicate and you know that it's going to be well received, it increases your ability and again, your emotional safety in terms of your communication to your loved one. And healthy validation, it promotes healing. Corrective emotional experiences reshape beliefs. I talked about corrective emotional experiences. I can't remember which happy hour. When I was doing this slide, I was like, which one did I talk about that in? But um, corrective emotional experiences essentially kind of you have a number of really troubling experiences, but if you can have more corrective emotional experiences, it's not that you forget, it's just your brain can recall that things are okay, that the world is a safe place, that people are safe. So when you go to someone that you love and you tell them that you're hurting or you're confused or something, and they validate it, the number of healthy validation experiences that you have serve as corrective emotional experiences, and it makes it so that you heal from all of the times where your feelings were not validated. Healthy validation can be a corrective experience for people who grew up emotionally unseen. Here is the list of phrases. This is what I need you to print out and tape it to your dashboard. I need you to save this to your phone. I need you to commit this to memory. I need you to write standards like you're in the third grade and you got in trouble for throwing a spit wad on the ceiling. These are phrases that need to be embedded in your vocabulary so that they come out automatically. Okay. When I don't know what to say, let me go to this list of phrases and pick one because saying one of these validating phrases is much more powerful than not saying anything at all or saying one of those toxic positivity phrases like, girl, it's going to be all right. Like, okay, yeah, I know, but it's not all right today. Right. So I need you to keep this list close by because these are some of the phrases. Remember, my lists are never exhaustive. So these are some of the phrases that you can use to validate a loved one that comes to you. That makes sense. Crazy concept. That makes sense. Like, yeah, that does make sense. I could see that. It's so much more validating before you start debating about why they shouldn't feel the way that they feel. Or you just could say, well, that makes sense. Or you could say, I can understand why you would feel that way. I didn't understand. Yeah, no, I think if my mom, sister, brother, boss, if my car broke down in the middle of the freeway on the way to a third job interview where you figured that you were a shoe in, I can understand why you would feel that way. That goes a long way. Validating someone's feelings is not about agreeing or fixing the problem. We're not asking you to agree. We're just asking you to show up emotionally in a supportive manner. So I can understand why you would feel that way is supportive. You don't necessarily have to feel that way. We just need you to show up for the other person. That sounds really difficult. How many times have you been wrestling with something that was difficult on the back end? And then when you finally said it to somebody and they said, that sounds really difficult, you're like, oh my God, thank you. I knew it wasn't just me. I knew that I wasn't just having a hard time. Just this morning in a therapy session, I mentioned a friend of mine. Her name was Carla. She was in the DSW program with me at USC. She's actually passed on. She passed away a couple of years ago. But I was saying how when I started the doctorate program, that first semester, I had the worst imposter syndrome. Nobody tells Stephen Lewis because he's a friend of mine that specializes in imposter syndrome. I had the worst imposter syndrome, and I was actually seriously considered dropping out of that doctorate program because I was like, oh my goodness, this is really hard. The asynchronous work, I feel like I'm in over my head. I had a conversation with Carla about halfway through the semester, and she goes, oh my gosh, that sounds really hard. Why are you not in our group chat? And I was like, wait, what? And I remember she had sent out the invite for the group chat, but I was like, I don't know these people, so I didn't join the group chat. She put me in the group chat, and I was able to go back and reread the messages because you know how in group me you can go all the way back to the beginning. And it was so validated, felt so validating because the very things that I found difficult, every single one of my classmates also found difficult. There is so much validation in someone saying that does sound difficult because then you no longer feel incompetent. You no longer feel like it's your individual struggle. You see, like, okay, anybody would find this task difficult. Shout out to Carla. Rest in peace. I'm listening. I'm listening is a very validating statement because often people who have felt invalidated don't feel like anybody is listening. They feel like they have to scream at the top of their lungs. They feel like they have to be emotionally manipulative in order to get their needs met. These are people that they create woe is me scenarios or they give you bits and pieces of what's going on. So then they can always say, well, I got stuff going on that you just don't understand. But when you can say, I'm listening, and then they know, oh, finally, someone sees me, someone is listening. Wow, okay. Maybe my feelings are worth something. Maybe it is worth it for me to talk about this out loud. Your feelings are valid is one of the most powerful things that you can say. Your feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid. Again, it's not agreement. It's not even saying that you would have the same feelings if you were in the same scenario. It's just saying your feelings are valid. Another very powerful one. I'm a big proponent. One of my love languages is the words of affirmation. I'm a big proponent on hearing, I apologize. Hearing the phrase, I apologize is very powerful for me, especially. I apologize. I hear how that hurt you, and I didn't realize I was doing that. It's not about saying that you're the worst person ever, but actively apologizing to someone when they come to you with their concerns, with their fears, or, with something that they're noticing. Not saying, like, oh, I'm listening. Okay, are you listening or are you taking accountability for the contribution of your actions? Actively apologizing to your children. I know we don't do that, but yes, we do. Actively apologizing to your children, your little kids, your adult children. Actively apologizing to your coworker that is always messing up. Actively apologizing. I hear you. I didn't realize I was making that mistake. I didn't realize I was impacting you in that way. It goes a long way. I can see why that impacted you. I can see why that impacted you. I can see how that had that effect on you. Goes a long way, guys. Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Like, oh, whew, huh, I just needed a safe place to land. Thank you for sharing that. You don't sound crazy to me. You don't sound crazy to me. Like I said, in my sessions with my clients, I have said, you're not crazy. You don't sound crazy to me. Okay. It goes a long way. Because when we're just holding on to things, you're ruminating about it, just kind of goes around and around, and you feel like, oh my goodness, like it has to just be me. And it's not. It's not. Another one, I may not fully understand, but I want to. This is another very powerful one. You don't have to get it on the first go round. You don't even have to agree with it. But having an earnest heart and an earnest desire to want to support someone through understanding is very powerful. It definitely builds, it's like connective tissue in relationships. And you deserved support in that moment. So this is when people come to you and they tell you about something that happened previously in the past, where maybe it was an ex-partner or an old best friend or a professor that embarrassed them really bad in a classroom. But to be able to say you deserve support in that moment, to acknowledge that something happened and you did not get what you needed and you should have. Again, my lists are not exhaustive. Okay. There are lots of validating statements. These are just some really powerful ones. Please commit these to memory and consider the source. So when you are asking for emotional validation, I want you to consider the source. Not everyone has the emotional maturity, the awareness, the capacity to validate you consistently. Not everybody has that. Okay. So use discernment. Ask yourself before you go to them. I mentioned that I call my cousin Rob because I know that he's there for me and I'm there for him. Before you reach out to this person, before you go to them looking for some sort of emotional security or your feelings validated, ask yourself, is this person emotionally safe? Have they shown me that they have the ability and the capacity to be emotionally safe for me? Okay. Also, are they emotionally capable? Are they capable of even doing what I'm asking them to do? Is this relationship reciprocal? Ask yourself, am I there for them, but they're not really there for me? This might not be a place where I'm going to get my feelings validated. And am I asking for consistent or constant? Because now you have a responsibility for yourself to regulate yourself emotionally, to self-soothe. If you need constant validation, we have a different problem on our hands. Okay. If I mean every day, do you like me? Do you love me? Did I do a good job? Are we good? If you need constant validation, that's a different story. We are looking for consistent validation. And if you need constant, please come talk to me because that's absolutely a thing that we deal with in therapy. That is what I have for today. I think I'm finishing a little bit early because I feel like I was going pretty fast. So thank you very much for coming to the happy hour. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat. And if not, thank you very much for coming to the happy hour.